I cannot emphasize enough the importance of supporting scholarship, qualified, authentic scholarship that is rooted in our particular North American context. Alhamdulillah, I've been honored to sit with many different scholars in different places, and one of the things that I've always noticed in terms of the ulama that have that quality that really kind of resonates with their students is that they can really kind of speak to the issues of their students and the larger community in a very real way that's not abstract. And in making that translation from that context of studying in Damascus, which was, there's something very special about Damascus and that almost rarefied atmosphere that you found at the school there, and being with all those students of knowledge, then trying to translate that back to the United States, and working with students here in this country. And I actually teach full-time at a seminary, Taysir Seminary in Knoxville. But nonetheless, the reason why I think it's so important to support Lamppost is that my students come to me, they take fiqh, for example, at the seminary, and we're teaching based upon a manual of Imam al-Shafi'i, obviously written centuries ago. And so here these students are coming from all parts of the United States with different backgrounds, different experiences. And they're trying to make sense of this text that was produced centuries ago. And they're coming to me with questions, and the youth in the community are coming to me with questions about issues that we never even would have considered in Damascus, to be really honest with you. I mean, these conversations never really even came up. Even when I was coming up right here in this country, and alhamdulillah, my dad, Brother Mansour, is sitting right here. He converted to Islam in the 1970s, so did my mom. She's African American, he became Muslim first, and she became Muslim first and gave da'wah to my father, who was from a Lebanese Christian background. I wanted to mention that, because people have asked me, what is your background? So even coming up in this country, the challenges and struggles that we had as young people, subhanAllah, I mean, I think in some ways kind of pale in comparison to what young people are coming with today. I mean, the questions they have, you know, where someone is asking, how do I deal, for example, how do I interact with my friend who's a member of the LGBT community? How do we address transgenderism? You know, how do we make a space for transgender Muslims in the masjid? You know, any number of issues that they're coming to ask about. And these are issues that, quite honestly, we weren't even really thinking about as we perused our fiqh text in Damascus so many years back. So what I personally find very gratifying about Lamppost is that I can sort of translate between that professional and personal context. So I've got my students who come to me with their fiqh questions, and then I say, look, I want you to actually look at the resources that exist here in this country. Sheikh Abdullah, for example, has written an article on this very topic. Go and take a look at that article. You know, I refer people to Lamppost all the time in terms of those kind of contentious, kind of difficult, thorny conversations that we need to have about identity, or sexuality, or feminism, or masculinity, or questions of belonging here, questions of racism. You know, there's that very famous, I think, series that Dr. Sherman Jackson did that was on Lamppost Productions, I think, about white supremacy as a modern-day form of shirk. These are compelling topics. And I think that for us, in this particular context, I think one of the blessings of being here in the United States is that we are not really in, well, not yet, but we don't really have this environment of complete political repression where we have to be so careful about what we say and to what extent we can address our issues and concerns. So I have, alhamdulillah, been very gratified and really grateful to work with Lamppost. I mean, I can't say I'm the most active board member, unfortunately, but alhamdulillah, it's been an honor to have had some contributions, some small contributions along the way to Lamppost. And again, when I work with my students and they come to me with questions about their religion, ultimately these questions are beyond issues of gender and identity and activism. What they're really kind of getting at here is, how relevant is Islam to me as a young American Muslim, as a young American, right? Is this deen still relevant? Can it really address my needs and the needs of my friends and my community? You know, recently Pew came out with this statistic that found that about a quarter of American Muslims are not identifying as Muslim anymore. You know, again, as a child of converts, I find that deeply disturbing. Again, I look at the devotion and zeal of my mother, an African American, and my father, Lebanese American, and how they found Islam and they became Muslim, and their entire their entire being was suffused with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you have today this statistic that is showing that a quarter of Muslims are so apathetic that they're no longer, for whatever reason, they have this apathy. They're either calling themselves agnostic or atheist or even Christian in some cases. Where is this coming from? Why this disconnect? And again, I work with young people, I talk to women, and people express their concerns, their grievances, and we really have to figure out a way, for those of us who are able to go and study and sit with mashayikh and shaykhat and anisat and teachers, how are we going to translate our experience into something that's beneficial and directly relevant to the concerns of our community here in North America? We want this religion not just to survive, but to thrive. And that's something that really preoccupies me. How is it that Islam managed to thrive in so many different cultures and so many different societies? And my sense is that it's because Islam took root, not in a very kind of like top-down, imposed from the political structure type of imposition, but it took root in the hearts and the minds of the people. And you had this class of ulama, of teachers and scholars, and their teachings are able to resonate with people. I mean, alhamdulillah, we're a very literate community, that just the fact that we've got this diversity of people gathered here on a weekend, in the masjid to seek knowledge, right? When you could have been anywhere else. I like to joke with my mother and father that, mashallah, Muslims attend conferences and conventions like other people attend concerts, and we really, subhanAllah, I mean, to me, that's very gratifying that all of us are here. But again, this idea of we cannot be passive, we cannot be complacent when it comes to the thriving and flourishing of Islam in this country. And for me, the pathway to that is through supporting scholarship, through learning, through growing, through developing, through respecting that tradition of sacred knowledge. And again, for me, Lamppost, there's this personal aspect too, because one of the books that I found very, very helpful that Sheikh Abdullah had written, there's a book called Tears of the Yearners for the Meeting with God. And that book was the very first book I read after my husband passed away, Allah yarhamhu. And it was so helpful to read that book because there's not a lot of literature that's been produced to help Muslims, for example, in the grieving process. So that was a very helpful book. And I think for us to have teachers and scholars and mashayikh like Dr. Sheikh Abdullah, like Dr. Jackson, like so many of the other contributors to Lamppost, this is something that we need to celebrate, we need to elevate. And we don't have a waqf system, right? We don't have a system where scholars and their families can be sustained through endowments. That doesn't exist here in the US. So it is really up to you, the community, the donors, to make that contribution. And as someone who's involved with several nonprofits, I have to say, make it a monthly contribution, right? I mean, the one-time donations, alhamdulillah, are great, but it's those ACH donations, right? Those monthly contributions that you set up. You can do that online. It's very, very easy. And every month, consistently, inshallah, your donation will go towards Lamppost. And consider this a sadaqah jariyah. That every dollar that you put forth towards supporting Islamic scholarship and this dialogue, right, and this platform that we have for our community is sadaqah in your favor, that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when Allah Ta'ala looks at that preponderance of good deeds, right, on the scale, and that scale is heavy with good deeds, that you want, from amongst those good deeds, you want to have that sadaqah jariyah that you gave to Lamppost and other deserving organizations. So I strongly encourage you, look at your budget, think about the things that we might spend towards entertainment, right, towards our coffee habit, whatever it is, and redirect that towards Lamppost. That is sadaqah for you and for your family, inshallah ta'ala.